Hello and welcome to episode 3 of the Lack of Interesting Conversation podcast. I am your host, Trey Mendenhall. I want to thank you for joining us again today as we sat out on breaking down the NFL playoffs. I think this is going to be um, one of part one of two as today we will be breaking down the NFC side of the playoff bracket. But first, before we get into that, I wanted to shout out all you those who have listened to the podcast, the previous two podcasts. I appreciate you listening. It means the world to me. I'm so thankful for what God has done so far with this podcast. It's really blown my mind. The amount of listeners that we have had, and I just pray we continue to grow. Um, it's been pretty incredible. It's been throughout the United States, some places I never thought this podcast could reach. Just not from, I guess, the center where I am, but also it's pretty incredible that we've had a couple of international listeners too. So thankful for that. And also, I just wanted to remind you that you can find us on Facebook. That is our only social media platform that we are on at the Lack of Interesting Conversation podcast Facebook page. If you just type it in the search engine, you should be able to find it pretty quickly. And on that, also, you can find the link to our RSS website on that one, too, on the Facebook page, which if you click on that, that will also lead you to be able to find us on the podcast platform of your preference, wherever you listen to the podcast, whether that be Apple, Spotify, or Amazon. And also, we are on YouTube as well. If you listen to podcasts on YouTube, we are available on there and anywhere you can get your podcast. Wherever it may be, I'd really appreciate it if you would just like/follow our podcast, that you would rate it, give it a like, give it a thumbs up, leave us a comment, and that'd be much appreciated. Also, if our last podcast touched you anyway, I just would love to hear from you, as I know last week was a pretty personal podcast that my son was willing to open up about his struggle with OCD. We both believe that that would help um, people who are struggling. And if that podcast did touch you at all, please just reach out to us in any of the ways that I shared previously, um, and just let us know. And even you can even try it if you don't want to share that publicly. If you want to reach out via sending us a message on Facebook, that'd be awesome too. All right. Anyway, let's get on to today's subject as we are breaking down the NFC side of the playoff in this part one, two-part NFL playoff breakdown. As we here start with the number one seed, the Seattle Seahawks. This is the first time they've had the number one seed in the playoffs since 2014. I don't know if you've been around football of any length of time, as you know that 2014 Seahawks team had a chance to win the Super Bowl. But instead of running the ball with Marshawn Lynch, they chose to throw it, and obviously that led to the Malcolm Butler interception. I mean, Tom Brady and the New England Patriots, their fourth Super Bowl, I believe, and their first Super Bowl, I think, since uh, Super Bowl 39 when they defeated the Eagles that year. Obviously, I think the Seahawks team kind of came out of nowhere this year. I'm not too sure if people had this high of hopes for them. Obviously, the entire, pretty much most of the NFC has been probably the best division in football this year, as there's three playoff teams from that division alone, with Seattle obviously coming on top and securing that top seed this past weekend when they defeated the 49ers. But this is also Seattle's first time being in the playoff since 2022, their first division title since 2020. Obviously, they got a little bit of a high-powered offense, averaging 28.4 points per game. They got a top 5 defense. It's helped them a lot this year, especially since with Sam Darnold, which was probably their biggest, might have been the key signing this offseason as to why they're in this position. Although I did see a stat that he's turned the ball over 20 times this year, which is not good. Which is crazy, to be honest. It's insane, I know. But if they didn't have as good of a defense as they do, the 20 turnovers may have stopped them from winning as many games as they have. As obviously the final record, regular season at record of 14. I think that may be the best, tied for the best in the league with the Broncos. I believe. I could be wrong about that. But then we go to the number 2 seed, the Chicago Bears. This is the first time they've been in the playoffs since 2020. Their first division title since 2018. That year, that was Matt Nagy. I think it may have been his very first year as head coach when he was with the Bears. That was also Mitchell Trubisky's probably his best year as a starting quarterback in the NFL. But obviously, they've done a complete 180, flipping their record last year, which was 5-12, and firing their former head coach Matt Eberflus last year. As one point, he did have them 4-2 last year, but then there came that Washington Jaden Daniels Hail Mary game that completely tanked their season after that. But Ben Johnson, coming over from Detroit, where he was the offensive coordinator, absolutely had that offense on fire. The last couple years he was there, it was a fun offense to watch. That's for sure, putting up a lot of yards, a lot of points. He's obviously helped turn Caleb Williams into one of the top quarterbacks in the league and led them to have the third-ranked offense in the entire league. And their defense, although is in the bottom fourth of the league, they are one-ranked defense when it comes to turnovers, obviously having a plus 22 turnover differential, and that by far has probably made their defense look better than it actually is. But that is pretty incredible, having 23 interceptions, 10 fumbles for a total of 32 turnovers this year. That's incredible, and only giving the ball away a total of 10 times so far. That is pretty incredible. And then we go to the third-seeded Eagles. They obviously have had a down year after coming off winning their second Super Bowl, which they had, honestly, a phenomenal year last year. The second-ranked rush offense last year, and Saquon put up historic numbers, rushing for over 2,000 yards. This year, their rush offense has completely dropped off the face of the earth compared to where it was last year, averaging 116.9 rush yards per game this year. They averaged maybe 6 or 7 yards more passing per game this year, but which it hasn't necessarily led to wins. As I do remember seeing a stat, I can't remember exactly what it was, but something like if Jalen Hurts passes for over 200 yards this season, the Eagles are like 0-8, 1-8, or 1-6, or something like that. I can't remember. But when he passes for under 200 yards, they are 9-0. That is crazy. Yeah, I know, insane. Their defense they have a top 15 defense. I'm sure that certainly helped them keep them in games, especially when the offense has struggled, and it has struggled mightily sometimes this year. 100% sure, which is, I guess, not what they're used to. But they finished 11-6. Obviously, the first time that team in the last 20 years, since the 03-04 Eagles. I don't know if you remember them, but with Andy Reid, yeah, you Chief fans, before he was with the Chiefs, he was with the Philadelphia Eagles. Had Donovan McNabb. That 04 team had T.O. As a receiver, making that blockbuster trade in the offseason, getting him from San Francisco. So Brian Westbrook back there in the backfield. on defense. They still have Brian Dawkins, Javon Curse, but they obviously ultimately, as I mentioned earlier, end up losing in the Super Bowl that year. That team, I think, went like 5 straight NFC Championship games and was like 1-4, which is still mind blowing. It's really hard to be able to go that many championship games in a row. That's still impressive, but obviously the Super Bowl champions have had a down year this year. So let's move on to the 4th-seeded Carolina Panthers. Okay, this is their first time being in the playoffs since 2017. They were a wild card that year. They lost to the Drew Brees and Sean Payton led New Orleans Saints that year, 31-26, fellow divisional rival. But I could say this year they definitely needed help getting to the playoffs. Obviously, this past weekend, Week 18, the Bucks and Panthers, they both played, and if the Panthers would have beat the Tampa Bay, they would have outright clinched the division instead of having to wait and see and hope and pray that the Atlanta Falcons would beat the New Orleans Saints Sunday. But that's what ended up happening. The Bucks ended up winning 16-14 after they completely fell off a cliff earlier in the season. Thanks to the Atlanta Falcons ended up defeating the New Orleans Saints Sunday 19-17 because of the tiebreaker situation and all that. The Panthers ended up backing in to the playoffs and become the fourth. I believe this is the 5th ever team to enter the NFL playoffs with a losing record. The 2025 8-9 Carolina Panthers joined the 2022 Bucks, the 2020 Washington Commanders, the 2014 Panthers, and the 2010 Seattle Seahawks, which were the first team ever to enter the NFL playoffs with a losing record, which they ended up beating the Saints in the wild card round there. And that game is famous for the old famous Beast Quake, where Marshawn Lynch absolutely just would not take not scoring a touchdown for an answer that game. And out of all those teams, just the Seattle 2010 team and the 2014 Panthers team were the only two teams to win their matchup and move on to the divisional round where they ultimately lost. But this is obviously the first time the Panthers have also won the division since 2015. That was also Cam Newton's MVP year, and that was the year they played the Denver Broncos in the Super Bowl 50, which they ultimately lost. And also, I would say, they've been up and down pretty much all year, the Panthers have. But I would say their biggest win all year was against the number 5 seeded LA Rams, which the Rams, they started out the year hot. Obviously, they have the most prolific offense this entire season, as they are the number 1 ranked total offense in the National Football League. They have the number 1 ranked passing offense and number 7 ranked rushing offense as well. They were 9-2 actually going into that game with the Panthers. Then after losing 31-28, they kind of finished 500 with it going out the rest of the year. It didn't help the fact that they've been dealing with injuries like most teams are, and obviously Devontae Adams has played a big part in that. Their hot start this year, he led the league with 14 total receiving touchdowns. Obviously, it was a massive pickup in the offseason. Matthew Stafford returned to some former glory as he led the league this year in passing yardage and passing touchdowns. Also, maybe took some pressure off of Puka Nacua, who was tied for the first place with 119 receptions this year and over 1,600 yards. Kyron Williams also was 8 yards side of a 1,200-yard rushing season, but as they look to obviously get back to the Super Bowl as they did. I think the first year Matthew Stafford was there, as they become pretty much all in, even though they spent all their draft capital and everything just to get that one Super Bowl. It didn't take them very long to reload. And then we go to the sixth seeded San Francisco 49ers. They had a shot at the number one seed, but they did not get it thanks to losing to Seattle Saturday. I can't remember exactly what that final score was, but Seattle stopped them, and now the 49ers, because of the Rams, they could have had, if the Rams would have lost, they would have been the fifth seed, but because the Rams took care of business, um, they are stuck with the sixth seed. Obviously, I know the 49ers are definitely had to deal with a lot of injuries this season. I know their quarterback, Brock Purdy's been out a few times dealing with some turf toe, missed 6 games because of that. George Kittle's currently dealing with an ankle injury, even though he went Saturday. Christian McCaffrey's dealt with some stuff. Obviously, on their defense side of the ball, losing Nick Bosa, easily their best D lineman, to an ACL tear very early in the season at week 3. Then losing Fred Warner in week 6 to who had a dislocated and broken ankle for the season, his ending injury. And Brandon Ayuk being out, never coming back from his ACL tear from late last season, obviously has played an impact. Then obviously last year it was kind of a down year. I don't think too much was expected of the 49ers this year, as it was kind of looking like they were trying to do what the Dallas Cowboys did last year, where I think the Cowboys signed Ezekiel Elliott was their only free agent signing last year when they let like 10 or 11 players go, basically purposely tanking, lame duck, blow it up, as Cowboys insider Mike Fisher like to call it. Then, but it may have surprised some people that they ended up going 12-5, same as the Rams. Obviously, the Rams had a tiebreaker over the 49ers. But I mean, that's coaching staff with Kyle Shanahan and stuff. But, I mean, he's obviously an offensive guru, just like his father was when he was in Denver, leading John Elway to go out on top with back-to-back Super Bowl wins. It's been honestly pretty incredible and pretty hard to watch, especially because your defense can't stop them if you're going against them and you don't know what to do. But this is San Francisco's first wild card berth since 2021. That year they ran on a run, and the first in that wild year in the wild card game, I don't know. They went against the Cowboys pulling it out with Jimmy G as their quarterback, 23-17. I don't know. Remember the infamous Dak slide with like 5 seconds left and couldn't get down to spike the ball. Then going to the number one seed Packers. I think this is Aaron Rodgers last year in Green Bay, maybe, and defeating them 13-10, but ultimately losing to the Super Bowl champion LA Rams that year, 21-20. Obviously, they're looking to both teams, the Rams and the 49ers. I guess they split this year. The Niners won the first matchup in Week 5, and Week 10, the Rams won that matchup. But I'm guessing with with common game record of same opponents this year, the Rams had a better record at 6-2 than the Niners had at 5-3, which is why that is how that tiebreaker with the seedings existed. And going to the final seed of the NFC side of the bracket, we got the Green Bay Packers. They are the 9-7-1 Packers. Obviously, they're looking to avenge their 2024 wildcard loss last year. The Eagles was 22-10. Obviously, high hopes they had there in Green Bay for all their fans and stuff, especially after trading for Micah Parsons in the offseason, trading away Kenny Clark and a first-round pick to get a game record like Micah Parsons. Obviously, the injuries they've had to deal with kind of all season, especially here late in the year with Jordan Love getting concussed in week 16 in a loss to the Bears. And he also had to deal with some shoulder injuries. Then the unfortunate thing happened in week 15 with Micah Parsons tearing his ACL. They went on to lose that game 34-26. They'll obviously have to be road warriors to make it to the Super Bowl. But that's what happened with the 2010 Packers. The year the Super Bowl was in Dallas at AT&T when they went against the Steelers. They were a wild card team that year, and they had to go on the road and just to get the Super Bowl, in which they did, and they ended up winning what would be Aaron Rodgers' only Super Bowl championship so far in his illustrious career. But really, the Packers have been up and down all year. They started off 2-0, then basically it all came crashing down in week 3 when they lost to the Browns 13-10. Then the following week, tying with the Cowboys 40-40, which if the Cowboys had a better defense, the Cowboys definitely would have won that game. Then after that, going pretty much 7-5 down the stretch after that game, never really finding a rhythm or that consistency needed to put yourself above the fold of the rest of the teams in the league and in your conference and in your division. But all right, so we'll move on here to my NFC predictions here in the NFC side of the NFL playoff bracket. So the first game of on the 10th Saturday is the Rams at the Panthers. Obviously, they play each other week 13 this year. The Panthers came out and top shocked the world. This time, I don't think they do that. I think the Rams, Devontae's supposed to be back this week. I think Rams take care of business this time. I think they go into Carolina looking for revenge, and I think they get it. I think the Rams offense is just too high powered, and I think Matthew Stafford is looking to light them up, which I think they do, and I think they move on, which means they are, with the Rams being the 5th seed, they are more than likely going to divisional opponent Seattle the following week. Then that game starts at 4:30 on Saturday. Then the late game Saturday at 8 o'clock on Amazon Prime, you can catch that there, is the number 2 seeded Bears versus the number 7 seed Packers. Obviously, a heated divisional matchup, a matchup in which both teams do not like each other at all. This is basically Caleb Williams and Ben Johnson led Bears playoff debut with Matt LaFleur over there on the sideline for the Packers and Jordan Love. They've obviously have plenty of playoff experience behind them, but I would say just with all the nagging injuries, especially with Jordan Love missing the last couple of weeks, and having to get back into playoff form, I do think that will ultimately cost them, especially if, my goodness, if the Packers, what are they, 13th in turnover, they're +1 turnover differential, and the Bears are +22. So I definitely, especially if the Bears defense can get to Jordan Love make mistakes, Josh Jacobs, I think he's even questionable. Make Josh Jacobs fumble the ball, maybe. If they can get those and start to make the Packers turn the ball over, this may get ugly quick because that Bears offense is high powered and looking to make a statement. I believe I have the Bears advancing to the next round. So, and that leaves the last game on the NFC side of Wild Card Weekend at 4:30 on Fox Sunday. The 49ers travel to Philadelphia. This should be a really good matchup, to be honest. Both teams super physical. Obviously, the Niners are banged up. The Eagles up and down, constant dysfunction all year. What else is new? With offense not doing so hot, and I guess, to be honest, if they get down early, goodness, if they get down early, how are they going to react? I guess, even though Philadelphia's defense has been better than the Niners has this year, that's been down then. Both teams have plenty of playoff experience, but the Eagles do know what it's like what it takes to make it to the Super Bowl. This may be the toughest for me on this side of the bracket. I'm going to go The 49ers. Yeah, the 49ers this go round. I think the 49ers go into Philadelphia. Philadelphia's dysfunction catches up to them, and the Niners upset the Eagles, and then move on to Seattle for a rematch, Week 18. Obviously, then you got the number one seeded Seattle Seahawks going up against the 49ers. I believe they split the season series. And obviously with Seattle coming out on top this last go round, I think the 49ers are hungry. Obviously, I mean, with this being a divisional matchup, it'll be very intriguing, very tough. A very tough battle. I think. I think somehow, some way, especially with the help of that defense, and if Sam Darnold can not commit a bunch of turnovers, be honest with whoever the play, and even if I'm wrong, I think honestly that's really the key. As long as Sam Darnold doesn't turn over the ball, I think Seattle advances to the championship game. Then you got the Bears, Eagles. No, wait a minute, Rams, Eagles. Sorry. Obviously, the Rams here, compared to the Bears, have a ton more playoff experience. But obviously, either that can even mean the Bears either play free or they play really tight. Although Matthew Stafford earlier in the year, he was, I think he only had 2 or 3 interceptions for the majority of the year. But here, as of late, he started to turn over ball a lot more, which is obviously a dangerous recipe if you're playing the Bears because how high-powered that offense is. I think the Bears make it to the NFC title game that year. I believe that would be the Chicago Bears' first NFC title game since 2010, the Jay Cutler bicycle game there where they faced the Packers. The year the Packers ended up going and winning the Super Bowl that year, and it'll obviously be Seattle's first title game since the 2014-2015 season when they went to the Super Bowl and ended up losing to the Patriots. And then my NFC represent for the Super Bowl. I'm going to go with Seattle. I think Seattle makes it back to the Super Bowl 60, for the first time in 11 years. So anyway, you have to wait and check out part 2 for my AFC predictions. But at the end of that, I will give my Super Bowl prediction of who I think ultimately wins Super Bowl 60, who walks away world champions at the end of the game in February. Anyway, thank you for listening to part 1 of the NFL playoff predictions breakdown here on the Lack of Interesting Conversation podcast.